It's also interesting to see how like almost every ancient civilization has some form of this type of work, whether you're looking at like some of the Aztec, you know, like the pattern designs and things that they were doing, or you're looking at native tribes and what they were doing. It's like, it's always really cool to see how inside all forms of people, no matter where or whatnot, like we're attracted to things like geometry, symmetry, repetition, pattern, and ornamentation. I think that there's something like embedded within us that attracts us to these things, and some people find, you know, peace in it, and I definitely am one of those people. Like exploring the idea of this type of art form, which has been around for centuries, but is becoming more and more obsolete due to things like economic sanctions and embargoes and all these types of obstacles that make it really difficult for this art to be made in the countries where it was originated. Like, you know, the first time I went, I started traveling in the Middle East, and like culturally, ethnically, my background is Cuban and Syrian, both countries which are heavily sanctioned. Another country being Iran, where this work is heavily inspired by the pattern designs and just the elements and the ornamentation that I use. When I was in Iran, I was trying to buy these carpets that I fell in love with, and the process of buying that was so almost impossible in the sense, because you're not allowed, if you even type like the word Iran or Syria or something like that within PayPal or Venmo or something, you instantly get blocked, because we're in the West, we're not allowed to do any sort of trade with these countries. Now it gets deeper than that with something like sending, you know, medicine or having ability to get certain, you know, treatments. Look, who is that suffocating more than the people? And the long-term effect of that is this type of artwork. And again, you know, I work in painting. This is more traditionally seen in weavings and in carpets and whatnot. But the younger generation is just not doing it because there's no money in it. There's no, you know, actual future in it. So I think, you know, a generation or two from now, it's just not going to be seen other than in ancient works that are in museums and things like that. So, but personally, when I first went over there, there was like this survivor's guilt. I can only speak on like my firsthand experience, you know, and how I've seen like actual people be affected by this, and a thing that I'm so passionate about, like this art form, just becoming more and more obsolete. And then you're seeing it kind of go more and more machine made, where you'll get kind of Western companies kind of creating these designs out of, you know, machines, and it just completely loses its importance to me, which is that idea that this thing was funneled through a human hand. So it's the first time where I'm creating these entire paintings and then coming back after and obscuring or like masking off portions of it. There's almost like an element, I want to think of like performance art to it, like the idea of spending 3 months on a painting and then going and through this screen printing process, not erasing because it lives there, but, you know, obscuring or masking off like 25 to 30% of the painting. And the idea of that was, again, to like kind of reference that suffocation or erasure that happens to cultures and like, you know, cultural exports, like what would be deemed handicrafts or artworks like this. Because as mentioned before, the idea is for like those obscured portions to feel like an extension of the painting or like a censorship of the painting. So in order for that to work and make sense, we had to like use the same tones from it so it can feel like it's kind of like growing from in that. But even the shapes and things that we're using for those screen prints are based off of like scans and different pulls that I took from like maps and shapes of countries. It's like I mentioned, some of like the choices of bringing these colors in and out of like the background is for it to ideally be able to like flow in with these parts that are coming on top of it. Like it's not just a flat colored background where we're just like printing different shades of beige on top of. It's kind of like ideally going to mimic as if it's flowing out of that. I'm gonna almost be passing the baton. Obviously I'll be overseeing that and kind of guiding them, but there is this moment of like handing over my children, you know, which again goes back to the whole entire process of this and that idea of feeling, you know, uncomfortable or feeling like confined and things like that. And specifically, I wanted the works to be formulated in that way where if you saw them, you didn't know what was happening, because I think that mirrors this idea of this, you know, the greater picture of something like the effects of these sanctions and embargoes and things like that, where it's a gradual, slow burn, where it's not something where like it happens from one day to the other and then you're just like, wait, what happened? It just kind of casually takes over, and we're seeing like things like this happening all over. You know, the repercussions and the outcome of this stuff is going to be something that's seen for generations and years on when that goes on. And it feels sometimes like to touch on something so heavy through a work that is so ornamentation and so aesthetically pretty sometimes can feel like trivial. But at the same time, these elements are so important and the identity of them is so important, where I feel like it also is almost the perfect way to kind of touch on that.